Have you ever wondered why certain stories, no matter how ancient or simple, feel like they were written just for you? Like they were whispering something eternal that your soul has longed to remember? There's a book, quietly circulating among seekers and sages. It's called Whispers of Manifestation. Not a flashy bestseller, not a viral TikTok trend, but something more intimate, a thread of ancient wisdom woven into the modern mind. It suggests something radical, that you can attract what you need not by wishing or dreaming, but by aligning your spirit with timeless truths. That there are sacred techniques hidden in plain sight, wrapped in metaphors, old parables, and the quiet pauses between your thoughts. It's not some half-baked law of attraction meme. It's the real deal, subtle, silent, and potent. And yet, I have always felt that same calling, not merely to attract things into my life, but to understand the deeper architecture of how life works. Not just to heal, but to liberate, not just to feel calm, but to truly embody presence. The kind of presence the ancients lived by, not as a trend, but as a way of breathing. On this channel, we don't chase the superficial. We listen, we observe, we remember. Welcome to Buddhism in every moment, where we awaken not through grand gestures, but through stillness. Today, I'm going to take you on a journey, a meditation in the form of story. 10 stories, in fact, but not merely to entertain you. These are teachings disguised as tales, codes embedded in narrative, and more importantly, we will go beyond just hearing the story. We will live them, interpret them, expand upon them, and personalize them. And in that process, you will begin to feel how the ancient meets the modern, right inside your breath, your thoughts, your awareness. So take a deep breath. Let go of your expectations. You won't be told what to believe here. You'll be invited to remember what you've always known, deep down. Let's begin. I want you to imagine this. You're floating gently down a river in the early morning light. The water is calm. The mist curls around you like silk. You're alone, undisturbed, and for a moment, life is as it should be. Silent, still, sacred. But then, suddenly, another boat appears in your path. It's heading directly toward you. Instinctively, you call out, "Hey, watch out!" No reply. The boat keeps coming. "Move aside," you shout. Louder now, irritated, but still, no change. And then, crash. The two boats collide. Now, adrenaline surges. You're ready to unleash all your frustration on the careless fool who dared disrupt your peace. But then, you look into the boat, and realize it's empty. There's no one there. It was drifting, carried by the current, moved by the wind, and just like that, your anger dissolves. The question is, why? Why do we get so angry at events that, like the empty boat, have no real intention to hurt us? In Buddhist teachings, this story is not just about a boat. It's about you, about me, about the projections of our ego, the assumptions we make, the blame we assign, the offense we take. The moment we believe someone is doing this to me, we give birth to suffering. But when we realize the boat is empty, something shifts. Suddenly, the story becomes about our reaction, not the situation. Let me share with you what I've come to learn. After years of walking this path, ego, the first illusion to fall. In the Buddha's teachings, the ego, the sense of I, me, and Mine is considered a fabrication, a mental formation born from clinging and ignorance. And yet, it is this very ego that causes us to interpret every event as personal. When someone cuts us off in traffic, our inner voice doesn't say, "A car changed lanes." No, it screams, "He cut me off." The assumption of intention is instant, and we respond not to the event itself, but to our interpretation of it. But what if, like the boat, the person wasn't even aware? What if they're drifting, unconscious of the harm they've caused? The truth is, most people are, not out of malice, but out of their own entanglement in their own suffering. In this way, the world is filled with empty boats, and our suffering comes from mistaking them for attackers. A modern encounter. The office chair incident. A few years ago, I was in a high-pressure job. One day, I walked into a meeting and found that someone had taken my usual seat, the one near the window. Where I always sat, I felt this surge of irritation. He knows I sit there. Why would he do that? Is this some kind of power move? My mind raced. I spent the entire meeting simmering. Afterwards, I casually confronted the colleague, only to find out that he was told by our manager to sit there for the lighting, because he was being interviewed for an internal video project. The boat was empty, and yet, in my mind, I had filled it with a villain, a rival, an enemy. And that's what we all do, unconsciously, unless we train ourselves otherwise. Training the mind to see clearly. So how do we do that? How do we stop assuming intent and start seeing the empty boat for what it is? Here's what I've practiced and taught. Pause before reaction. Before responding emotionally, ask, is there truly someone doing this to me? Or am I simply caught in reactivity? Cultivate curiosity. Instead of jumping to judgment, get curious. Why did this happen? What else could be going on? See the interdependence. Understand that most people act not out of evil, but because they're trapped in their own suffering, just as we are when we're unconscious. This is not excusing behavior, it's releasing ourselves from the poison of resentment. Practice the empty boat meditation. Visualize yourself on the river. Imagine every frustration, insult, or slight as an empty boat drifting toward you. Feel the impulse to react. Then, let go. Watch it pass. Breathe. What Thich Nhat Hanh taught me. One of the most profound teachings I ever received came from a talk by Zen master Thich Nhat Hanh. He said, "When another person makes you suffer, it is because he suffers deeply within himself, and his suffering is spilling over. He does not need punishment. He needs help." When I truly understood that, I began to see everyone differently. That driver cutting me off? Suffering. That coworker gossiping behind my back? Suffering. That stranger online throwing insults? Overflowing with pain. They are all empty boats, moved by the currents of their karma, their conditioning, their trauma. And when I stopped blaming them, something amazing happened. I stopped suffering. A real story. The Buddhist prisoner. There's a story told of a Buddhist monk who was imprisoned for his beliefs. For years, he was beaten, humiliated, and deprived of basic needs. When he was finally released, he was asked, "Weren't you afraid you'd lose your peace or your compassion for your captors?" The monk replied, "Only once. I feared I might lose compassion for them." This is what it means to not take the boat personally. To realize that others' actions are often the product of their own storms. And if we can see that, truly see it, we free ourselves from the prison of blame. The empty boat within. But there's one more layer to this teaching. Sometimes, we ourselves are the empty boat. Sometimes, we drift into someone else's life, causing harm we didn't intend, unaware of our impact. In those moments, we must be humble. We must be willing to apologize, to learn, to wake up, because just as others are empty boats to us, we are to them. And in this mutual forgetting, we remember something greater, our shared humanity. Final reflection. So next time you find yourself ready to explode at someone, pause. Breathe. Ask yourself, is this an empty boat? More often than not, it is. And in that single breath, that sacred pause, you can choose peace over reaction. You can practice the Dharma not with incense or chanting, but with awareness, in the exact moment it matters most. Because Buddhism isn't just in temples or scriptures. It's in every moment. If this story spoke to you, stay with us. Because in the next story, a monk faces two tigers and discovers something profoundly sweet. I'll meet you there, in story 2. There's a saying in the Zen tradition, when walking, just walk. When eating, just eat. It sounds simple, even absurd, but within that simplicity lies one of the most profound realizations. The present moment is all we truly have. And yet, how often do we really live inside it? The story of the monk and the tiger isn't about escape. It's not about survival. It's about awakening in the most unexpected, terrifying, and beautiful way, right in the heart of danger. Let's walk into this moment together. Once, in a forest monastery high in the mountains, there lived a monk who had perfected the art of silent walking. Each day, he wandered the mossy trails, deeply present with the breath of the trees, the rustling of leaves, the rhythm of his own footfall. These walks were not for exercise, they were for union, a quiet merging with the now. But one day, that silence was shattered. A roar echoed through the forest. Not the wind, not a bird, but something primal, raw. A tiger. The monk turned, and through the brush came the unmistakable glint of orange fur, the low growl of hunger. The eyes locked onto him with wild urgency. In that moment, instinct kicked in. He ran, monastic robes flapping, heart pounding. The monk sprinted toward the cliff's edge. Without hesitation, he grabbed hold of a vine and swung himself over, dangling between earth and sky. Above, the tiger snarled at the edge. Below, another tiger, pacing, waiting, suspended between two threats. Death seemed certain. But then, as the monk hung there, he noticed something. Growing from the side of the cliff was a wild strawberry. Ripe, red, perfect. And in that impossibly fragile moment, he reached out, plucked the strawberry, and took a bite. It was exquisite. Not just sweet, transcendent. For in that fleeting second, nothing else existed. Not the tiger above, not the tiger below, not the inevitability of death. Only the strawberry, only the now. Commentary. The two tigers of past and future. This story has often been interpreted symbolically. The tiger above as the past, the tiger below as the future. Both threaten us. Both trap us. We dangle, always, on the thin vine of time. But what most people miss is this. The vine is not the danger, it is the gift. It is the present moment, the breath you are taking right now. And in that moment, we always have a choice. The monk, instead of panicking, chose presence. He chose joy, even in the shadow of fear. He tasted life. A real story. The burn unit patient. Let me share something personal. Years ago, I volunteered at a hospital, spending time with patients who had survived severe burns. Their pain was unimaginable, physical, emotional, psychological. Many were depressed, angry, broken. But one woman, whom I'll call Maya, stunned me. She had lost more than 60% of her skin to burns. She couldn't move her arms fully. Her face was scarred, but each morning, she insisted on eating one square of dark chocolate, slowly, deliberately, like a ritual. When I asked her why, she smiled and said, "Because it reminds me I'm alive. If I can still taste something this good, I can still feel joy. The pain doesn't cancel that." Maya's chocolate was her strawberry. Even amid horror, she had trained herself to find a moment of sweetness and savor it. On mindfulness. Not escaping, but entering life fully. Mindfulness is not a technique. It's a way of seeing. When you bring your full awareness into a moment, whether it's a sip of tea, a breeze on your face, or a tiger roaring from behind, you enter a deeper relationship with reality. You stop resisting what is, and you meet it with presence. This doesn't mean ignoring danger. The monk wasn't naive, he ran. But once suspended, he didn't waste energy fantasizing about escape or lamenting his fate. He accepted what was, and tasted what was offered. That's mindfulness. It's not control, it's participation. Thich Nhat Hanh once said, "Drink your tea slowly and reverently, as if it is the axis on which the whole world turns." What if every moment were treated that way? What if, when overwhelmed at work, exhausted as a parent, or lost in grief, we could pause and ask, "What is the strawberry here?" That question has changed my life. Exercise. Finding the strawberry in your day. Try this today. Choose one small action: brushing your teeth, making coffee, feeding your pet, and do it with full awareness. Taste every note, feel every texture. Let it be the only thing happening in the universe. Don't use it to escape the tigers, but to remember that even in their presence, beauty exists. The tiger as teacher. There's another layer here too. The tigers, the fear of failure, the threat of illness, the pain of loss, aren't just obstacles. They're teachers. Without them, would we ever notice the strawberry? Without urgency, we postpone presence. We assume we'll savor life later. But later is a lie. Later may never come. It is the very pressure of death that makes each taste of life so sacred. The monk didn't reach for the strawberry in spite of the tigers, but because of them. A story from a hospice nurse. A hospice nurse once told me that some of her most joyful patients were the ones with only weeks left to live. Why? Because they had nothing left to postpone. They said, "I love you," without holding back. They watched sunsets like it was the first time. They laughed with full bellies, cried without shame, held hands like it mattered. Why wait for terminal illness to learn what the monk knew clinging to a vine? Life is now. The strawberry is here. Buddhism and the present moment. In Theravada, Zen, and Mahayana alike. The message repeats. Liberation is not in the future. It's not after the retreat, after enlightenment, or after your problems are fixed. It's now. The breath, the moment between thoughts, the stillness beneath the noise. When the Buddha spoke of the cessation of suffering, he wasn't pointing to some cosmic realm, but to the space inside each moment where you stop grasping, where you simply taste, and in that taste, you awaken. Final reflection. So here's the question I want to leave you with. What tigers are chasing you right now? What fears grip you above and below? And more importantly, what strawberry is within reach? Find it, savor it, let it teach you. Because that moment, that taste, is enlightenment. Not in the abstract, not in the future, but here, now, always. We continue next with a tale straight from the lips of the Buddha, a story of two arrows, and the suffering we create by how we react to pain. It's one of the most elegant metaphors in all of Buddhist teaching. And it might just change how you view your struggles forever. I'll meet you there, in Story 3. There are moments in life when the pain is undeniable. A breakup that guts your heart. A diagnosis that shakes your foundation. A betrayal that burns through your trust like fire through paper. You feel the ache so vividly, in your chest, your stomach, your throat, and you ask, why is this happening to me? But what if I told you, the pain isn't the problem? That suffering, the tight spiral of grief, rage, anxiety, is often not caused by what happens, but by what we do with it afterward. Let's explore one of the most elegant teachings the Buddha ever gave. A teaching so simple, so profound, that once you understand it, your entire relationship with suffering will shift. It begins in a forest clearing. Over 2,500 years ago. The Buddha's story of the two arrows. As the wind stirred the trees, the Buddha sat under their shade, surrounded by his disciples. One of them, troubled and heavy-eyed, approached him. Master, he said, why do we suffer so much in this life? It feels like pain is everywhere. How can we ever be free of it? The Buddha, calm as the river, replied with a parable. Imagine a man walking through the woods. He said, and suddenly, he is struck by an arrow. It pierces his flesh. The pain is sharp, immediate. That is the first arrow. The disciples nodded. Pain. They understood. But now imagine, the Buddha continued, that the same man is struck again, this time, not by a physical arrow, but by his own mind. He screams, why me? This shouldn't have happened. I can't take this. I'm cursed. This is the second arrow. The Buddha paused. The first arrow is unavoidable. But the second, that one, we fire ourselves. Modern interpretation. Pain versus suffering. In modern psychological terms, we might call the first arrow, primary pain, a direct response to a real event. Your dog dies. Your partner leaves. Your leg breaks. The second arrow is secondary suffering, the stories, judgments, and resistance we layer on top. I'll never be happy again. I'm unlovable. Life is unfair. Let me ask you this. Have you ever experienced heartbreak, and then blamed yourself for months afterward? Ever gotten bad news, and then spiraled into anxiety about every possible future? Ever failed at something, and then decided you're a failure? That's the second arrow. And it hurts more than the first. A personal moment. The diagnosis. I remember when a close friend of mine, a longtime meditation teacher, was diagnosed with Parkinson's. The moment he heard the news, that was the first arrow. His body trembled, his breath shortened, but then, he smiled. I knew something was coming. He said softly, "Now I know its name." He didn't fight the truth. He didn't fall into despair. He accepted the first arrow, and refused to fire the second. I was stunned. Where most would collapse into grief, he sat in grounded presence. Pain is part of the path. He told me later, suffering is a detour. The habit of resistance. Here's the thing. Our minds are conditioned to react to pain with resistance. We label, we judge, we blame. It's like trying to stop a wave with your hands. The more you push, the more exhausted you become. But the Buddha's wisdom is this: you can't stop the wave. You can only learn to surf. When we meet pain with mindfulness, with bare attention, with breath, with acceptance, something changes. The pain is still there, but the suffering softens. This isn't about apathy, it's about freedom. Practical application. The second arrow meditation. Try this the next time you're in pain, physical or emotional. Step 1. Pause. Notice the first arrow. Feel the sensation. Where is it in your body? Don't label it, just observe. Step 2. Inquire. Ask yourself, what am I adding to this pain? Am I telling myself a story? Am I tightening around it? Step 3. Exhale. Release the second arrow. Whisper. This hurts, and that's okay. That simple shift, from resistance to witnessing, is the gateway to liberation. Wisdom from Pema Chodron. Pema Chodron, a renowned Tibetan Buddhist nun, once wrote, "Rather than letting our negativity get the better of us, we could acknowledge that right now we feel like a piece of shit and not be squeamish about taking a good look." That's radical honesty. That's refusing to shoot the second arrow. Instead of, "I shouldn't feel this way," we say, "I do feel this way, and I will sit with it." And in that sitting, suffering transforms. Real-world story. The layoff. Let me share another story. A woman I once counseled had just lost her job unexpectedly. Her company folded. She was devastated. But the worst part wasn't the layoff itself. It was her inner monologue. "I'm worthless. I'll never get hired again. My parents were right. I'm a failure." None of that came from the event. All of it came from the second arrow. When we worked together, I didn't ask her to stay positive. I asked her to tell me exactly how she felt, without judgment. "I'm scared," she whispered. And that was the first arrow. Finally seen clearly. After months of healing and mindfulness practice, she landed a better job, with more freedom. But more importantly, she stopped believing her thoughts. She stopped arming herself against herself. Buddhist teaching. The freedom to choose. The Buddha never promised a life without pain. In fact, the first noble truth is the acknowledgement of dukkha, suffering, dissatisfaction, stress. But he offered something deeper than avoidance. He offered agency. He offered the space between stimulus and response, a space where we can choose how we meet pain. In that space, suffering becomes optional, a teaching from the Dhammapada. All that we are is the result of what we have thought. The mind is everything. What we think, We become. If you think you are broken, you will act broken. If you believe pain defines you, it will. But if you see pain as part of the path, as the call to awaken, then every moment becomes the doorway. Even your worst moment, especially your worst moment. Final reflection. So today, I invite you to pause. Think of a painful memory you've been holding. Not to relive it, but to ask, was this pain unavoidable? And what suffering have I added since? Then, gently let go of the second arrow. Forgive yourself for carrying it. You didn't know you were bleeding. But now you do. And now, you can choose. You can still honor the pain, but not let it define you. You can breathe into it and walk forward. You can suffer less, not by avoiding life, but by meeting it fully. Awake. Because in the end, the arrows are not our enemy. Our forgetting is. But now, you remember. In our next story, we meet a grieving mother named Kisa Gautami. Her pain is so raw, so unbearable, that she begs the Buddha to bring her son back from the dead. What he teaches her is one of the most compassionate and necessary truths of all: the universality of loss, and the peace we find in letting go. There are moments in life that tear through the illusion of control, moments so raw, so unbearable, that no philosophy, no quote, no comfort can touch the pain. The death of a child is one of those moments. It collapses time. It undoes meaning. It can drive even the most devout seekers to their knees, demanding answers from a silent sky. This is the story of Kisa Gautami. But more than that, it's the story of you and me. And how we learn to walk through the fire of grief not by denying it, but by walking with it, until it softens into something we can carry. The story begins. A mother's desperation. Long ago, in a quiet village in ancient India, lived a young woman named Kisa Gautami. She was kind, gentle. She loved deeply, especially her infant son, a bright, beautiful boy who was the light of her world. But one day, without warning, that light went out. Her son fell ill, and he died in her arms. The world blurred. Her mind refused the truth. Her body shook with sobs. But her heart, her mother's heart, would not let go. So she did what many of us might do in our darkest hour. She refused to accept it. She cradled the child's lifeless body and walked through the village, knocking on doors, pleading, "Please, my son is sick. He's not breathing. You must know a cure. You must help me. I cannot lose him." But every home she entered, she was met with silence, or sorrow, or pity. "We cannot help you," they said. "Your son is dead." But Kisa could not hear that word. Dead. No, not her boy. Until someone pointed her toward the only person who might be able to help. "Go to the Buddha," they said. "Perhaps he can bring him back." And so, she walked, with the child's body in her arms. Kisa found the Buddha sitting beneath a tree, teaching his disciples. She fell to her knees before him, grief spilling from her lips. "Master," she cried, "please, bring my son back. I cannot bear this pain. I have lost everything." The Buddha looked at her not with shock or refusal, but with infinite compassion. He saw her suffering. He felt it, and he knew that no words would help. So he offered her a task. "Kisa," he said gently, "bring me one mustard seed from a household that has never known death. Just one. and I will restore your son." Her eyes lit up with hope. "Yes, Master, I will find it." And she ran. The pilgrimage of grief. Kisa knocked on the first door. "Please, may I have a mustard seed? But only if no one in your home has ever died." The woman at the door looked down. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "We lost our father last winter." Kisa thanked her, bowed, and moved on. "Next house. Please, a mustard seed. But no death." "I'm sorry," the man said. "My sister passed away last month." Again, she bowed. Again, she walked. House after house, street after street, and everywhere, sorrow. Every home carried a story of loss. A mother, a brother, a son, a friend. The truth began to sink in. Grief was not hers alone. It was everywhere. The entire world was holding some version of her pain. By sunset, Kisa had visited every home in the village. She had gathered no mustard seeds. But she had gathered something else. Understanding. She returned to the Buddha. This time, she did not plead. She placed the body of her son before him. "Master," she said quietly, "I could not find a single home untouched by death. I see now, this pain is part of life." The Buddha bowed his head gently. "Yes, Kisa," he said, "you have understood. Death comes to all. No one can avoid it. But by accepting it, we learn to live." And for the first time since her son died, Kisa wept not in resistance, but in release. She cremated her son with dignity. And not long after, she became a nun in the Buddha's Sangha, dedicating her life to helping others walk through their grief. Reflection. The universality of loss. There is a moment in all our lives when loss becomes real. Maybe you've already faced it. Maybe it's ahead, but it will come, and when it does, we will either harden, or we will awaken. We live in a culture that tells us to stay positive, to move on, to fix, to suppress. But Buddhism teaches us something radical. Let your heart break open. Let the grief teach you. Because in that brokenness, there is truth. That everything we love, we will one day lose. And yet, it is still worth loving. The power of facing death. In Tibetan Buddhism, there is a practice called Maranasati, the contemplation of death. It's not morbid, it's liberating. When you meditate on death, not to fear it, but to remember it, you wake up. You stop sleepwalking through your life. You stop postponing what matters. You stop waiting for the perfect moment, and begin to live each one as if it could be your last. Because it could. A story from a student. I once taught a retreat where a woman shared that she had lost her husband in a car accident. She was 32. She said what hurt most was not the moment of loss, but all the mornings afterward. When she would reach for his side of the bed and find only air. But she said something else too. "Now I love more fiercely. I say what I mean. I hold my parents longer when I hug them. I feel the sun. I feel my breath. I don't waste time." Her mustard seed was not a cure. It was the truth. Everyone we meet is carrying some form of loss. So we must be kind. To them. To ourselves. Buddhist insight. Impermanence is not the enemy. Anicca, impermanence, is one of the 3 marks of existence in Buddhist philosophy. Everything changes. Everything ends. But instead of grieving that truth, we can revere it. Impermanence is what makes a sunset beautiful, a song moving, a kiss electric, a child's laugh unforgettable. If nothing ended, nothing would matter. Kisa's story reminds us that accepting death doesn't mean loving less. It means loving more, because now is all we have. Final reflection. So today, I ask you, who or what have you lost, and haven't yet let go of? What grief are you carrying, quietly, silently, beneath your smile? Can you offer it space, not to fix it, but to feel it? And then, like Kisa, can you turn that pain into compassion? Because grief is not something to get over. It is a teacher, a temple, a mustard seed of wisdom buried in the soil of the heart. And when we let it bloom, we become human again. In the next story, we meet a farmer whose horse runs away. His neighbors say, "What bad luck." But the farmer? He simply says, "Maybe." What follows is a lesson in equanimity, non-attachment, and trusting life's unfolding, even when we don't understand it yet. I'll meet you there, in Story 5. There's a quiet kind of wisdom that doesn't chase answers. It doesn't rush to label moments as blessings or curses. It doesn't cling to joy. It doesn't fight pain. It just watches, breathes, listens. You might call it equanimity. In Buddhism, we call it upekkha, serene composure in the face of change. This is the story of a farmer. But more than that, it's the story of how not reacting too quickly can sometimes be the wisest reaction of all. The farmer's tale begins. There was once an old farmer in a small village. He owned only one horse, his most valuable possession. This horse helped him plow his fields, carry his goods to market, and earn a humble living. It was his livelihood. One day, the horse ran away. His neighbors came rushing to express sympathy. "What terrible luck!" they cried. "You must be devastated. How will you work the fields now?" But the farmer, standing calmly at the gate, simply said, "Maybe." The villagers were puzzled. Maybe? What kind of answer was that? But the farmer didn't explain. He just went back to tending his garden. A week later, the horse returned, bringing with it 3 wild horses from the mountains. Now the villagers were thrilled. "What great fortune," they said. "You've gone from 1 horse to 4. You are surely blessed." The farmer smiled softly and said, "Maybe." Again, the villagers were confused. Why wasn't he excited? But the farmer stayed quiet. Time passed. One day, the farmer's only son tried to tame one of the wild horses. He was thrown violently to the ground and broke his leg. The villagers came again. "Oh no, what misfortune! Your son is crippled. He won't be able to help you on the farm anymore." The farmer looked at them and said, "Maybe." Weeks later, war broke out in the land. Soldiers came to the village to conscript all the able-bodied young men. All the sons were taken, except the farmer's son, whose leg was broken. The villagers sobbed. Their sons had gone to war. "You are so lucky," they said to the farmer. "Your son was spared." And the farmer said, "Maybe." The wisdom of maybe. This story isn't just a fable about a stoic man with good timing. It's a meditation on how we suffer when we insist on labeling what happens to us. In Western thinking, we're taught to interpret events immediately. This is bad. This is good. This is unfair. This is fate. But in Buddhist thinking, we step back. We recognize that the unfolding of life is far too vast to be reduced to instant judgment. What seems like a setback may be a gateway. What feels like a loss may be a redirection. What looks like failure may be the very soil from which freedom will grow. Zen teaching. Is that so? There's a Zen story of a monk who was accused of fathering a child. Though he was innocent, he did not defend himself. He simply said, "Is that so?" When the child was brought to him, he raised it with care. Later, when the truth was revealed and the mother admitted the lie, the child was taken away. The monk again said, "Is that so?" That is not indifference. That is radical equanimity. The kind born from deep understanding that all phenomena arise and pass. Real-life story. The failed promotion. Let me share a story from one of my students. She had been working hard for years, hoping to get promoted at her company. When the opportunity finally came, she was overlooked, passed over for someone younger and less experienced. She was devastated, but instead of reacting with bitterness, she decided to pause. She said to herself, "This hurts, but maybe." 2 months later, the company went through a restructuring. The person who got the promotion was laid off. But because she hadn't taken that position, she kept her role and was given a generous offer to lead a project she had long dreamed of. She wrote me an email that ended with just one word. Maybe. Insight. Suffering comes from attachment to outcomes. In Buddhist psychology, clinging, upadana, is one of the key causes of dukkha, or suffering. We suffer not because things happen, but because we want them to happen a certain way. The farmer in the story did not cling to the outcomes of events. He simply met each moment as it came, with awareness, without attachment. This is not apathy. It is deep trust. It is the humility to say, "I do not know what this moment means yet." It is the courage to stay open, even when life doesn't follow your script. Exercise. The maybe practice. This week, when something doesn't go your way, pause. Take a breath, and instead of labeling it bad, whisper, "Maybe." Let the story unfold a little longer before you decide. You may find that time reveals a deeper wisdom than your immediate reaction ever could. Modern insight. The science of cognitive reframing. Psychologists call this cognitive flexibility, the ability to reframe how we interpret events. Studies show that people who can delay judgment and stay curious tend to be more resilient, less anxious, and better able to handle uncertainty. In other words, they say, maybe, more often. The ancient farmer was ahead of his time. What this means in practice. When you lose a job, maybe it's clearing space for something better. When someone breaks your heart, maybe it's breaking open a deeper love. When plans collapse, maybe it's life whispering, "This wasn't your path. We don't know." And that's okay. Dhammapada reflection. Mind precedes all mental states. They are mind-made. If with a pure mind one speaks or acts, happiness follows, like a shadow that never leaves. When you meet each moment with neutrality, with mindfulness, with maybe, you purify your mind, and from that stillness, joy arises. Final reflection. So today, I leave you with this. What have you labeled bad too quickly? Where are you stuck in disappointment, assuming life has failed you? Can you take a step back? Can you say, maybe, Because every story is still unfolding. And often, the most painful chapters turn out to be the prologue to something profound. Don't rush to define what this moment means. Live it, breathe it, let it reveal itself. Like the farmer, say, maybe, and in that space, find freedom. In our next story, the Buddha meets anger not with defensiveness, but with stillness. When a man insults him in front of his disciples, the Buddha responds with a metaphor that could change the way you handle every confrontation in your life. It's a lesson in emotional sovereignty, in choosing peace over reaction. I'll meet you there, in Story 6. Have you ever been insulted and stayed silent? Not out of weakness, but out of wisdom? Most of us have been taught that when we're attacked, verbally, emotionally, we must defend ourselves. That to be quiet is to surrender. That not responding means we've lost. But what if true strength lies not in reaction, but in stillness? This is the story of the Buddha. But more importantly, it's the story of how to free yourself from the emotional chains that others try to place on you. The encounter begins. One day, the Buddha was teaching his disciples under the shade of a Bodhi tree. The air was warm. The forest was quiet. Suddenly, from the shadows, a man appeared, face twisted with rage. He had heard of the Buddha's growing influence, of his teachings, his followers, his calm, and he hated it. "You are a fraud," the man shouted. "A manipulator. You pretend to be wise. But you are deceiving these people." The disciples froze. Some stood up, ready to defend their teacher. But the Buddha did not move. He did not flinch. He looked at the man, not with anger, not with fear, but with deep compassion. The man's voice grew louder. "Do you not hear me? Are you too proud to speak? Or are you afraid to answer me?" And still, silence. Eventually, breathless and exhausted, the man stopped. And then, the Buddha spoke. The Buddha's response. "Tell me," the Buddha said gently, "if someone offers you a gift, and you choose not to accept it, to whom does the gift belong?" The man, confused, blinked. "To the one who offered it." "Of course." The Buddha nodded. "Exactly. And in the same way, if you offer me your anger, and I do not accept it, then it still belongs to you." The man stood frozen. And in that silence, something began to shift. He had come to provoke, but found no opponent. His fire had nowhere to land. The second arrow of reaction. This story is a masterclass in emotional sovereignty, in the ability to remain untouched by someone else's projections. When someone insults you, what hurts most is not their words, but your reaction to them. Your ego, your story, your identification with the insult. That's the second arrow again. But the Buddha refused the second arrow. He stayed with the first, present, grounded, aware. He saw the man's rage not as a threat, but as suffering. He didn't mirror the anger. He reflected peace. Modern example. The social media storm. Let me bring this into our world. Not long ago, I received a cruel comment on one of my videos, an attack on my appearance. My voice, even my intentions. For a moment, my body reacted. Heat in the face. Tight chest. That old familiar surge. I wanted to defend myself. To fight back. To win. But then I remembered. This is their pain. Looking for a home. And I didn't have to let it move in. I sat with the feeling, and let it go. I didn't reply. And strangely, I didn't carry the insult. Because I never picked it up. The teaching. You don't have to receive every emotion. Think of emotions as offerings. Someone gives you blame. You don't have to accept it. Someone gives you guilt. You don't have to wear it. Someone hands you fear. You can decline the package. This isn't avoidance. It's discernment. You're not rejecting the person. You're choosing not to carry what isn't yours. In this way, you protect your peace without building walls. Practice. The verbal Aikido method. In martial arts like Aikido, you don't meet force with force, you redirect it. You step aside. You let it pass through. Here's how to do this in conversation. Breathe before responding. The pause is your sanctuary. Ask, what part of this is mine? Most of the time, the answer is none. See the suffering beneath the attack. Hurt people hurt people. Respond with kindness or silence. Not to please them, to preserve you. Example dialogue. Them. You always think you're better than everyone else. You. Pause. That sounds like it's been hard for you. Do you want to talk about what's really going on? Or, you. Silence. Gentle eye contact. No reaction. Either way, you break the cycle. You drop the rope in the tug of war. And suddenly, there's no more game to play. Buddhist insight. True power is in non-reactivity. The Buddha wasn't passive. He was unshakable. In the Pali Canon, there's a concept called anupada, non-clinging. It means not attaching to praise or blame, to gain or loss, to fame or shame. This is the equanimity that frees you from the roller coaster of opinion. When you don't cling to validation, you're not crushed by criticism. You become, like the Buddha, a still lake. People may throw stones, but your waters stay clear. Real-world inspiration. Michelle Obama's silence. In 2016, Michelle Obama was attacked with a slew of racist and sexist comments during an election cycle. But instead of lashing out, she remained silent until the moment she chose to speak. Not from anger, but from dignity. When they go low, we go high. She had learned what the Buddha knew. Anger offered, but not accepted, remains with the giver. Final reflection. So today, I ask you, who has tried to give you their anger? And have you been unknowingly carrying it? Can you lay it down? Can you recognize? This is not mine to hold. Because you always have that choice. You can meet fire with fire. Or, you can meet it with space. And in that space, you become free. Not because they changed, but because you did. Because you remembered. You are not the insult. You are not the projection. You are the sky, watching clouds pass by. In our next story, we join a Zen monk who holds up a teacup and says, "This cup is already broken." What follows is a profound meditation on impermanence, love without attachment, and living with an open heart in a fleeting world. I'll meet you there, in Story 7. There are two kinds of love in this world. One clings. It says, "Don't change, don't leave, don't break." The other releases. It says, "I see you, I cherish you, and I know you are already gone." This is the story of a teacup. But more than that, it is the story of how to love without fear, and how to let go without regret. The story begins. The teacup is already broken. in a quiet Zen monastery tucked into the green mountains of Japan. A revered monk lived a life of deep awareness. Every action was an act of mindfulness, sweeping the floor, lighting incense, walking the forest paths. But perhaps his favorite ritual was the afternoon tea ceremony with his students. One day, as the sun streamed through the wooden windows, the monk held up a clay teacup, beautiful in its simplicity, with an earthy glaze and a slight imperfection along the rim. He turned it in his hands and said softly, "This teacup is already broken." The students looked at one another, confused. One finally spoke, "But Master, the cup is whole. There's no crack. It's perfect." The monk smiled and set the cup down. "Yes, and that's why I cherish it so much. Because I know, one day, it will fall, or fade, or disappear. And because I know that, I love it even more right now." What does it mean that the cup is already broken? This teaching is not about pessimism. It's about presence. To say, "The cup is already broken," means, I accept impermanence as the truth of all things. And in doing so, I don't wait to love. I don't postpone appreciation. I don't cling in fear of losing. Because I know, I will lose everything. So instead of grasping tighter, I soften. Instead of protecting, I pour my heart into what is here, now. A real story. The last hug. A friend once told me she hugged her father goodbye at the airport without knowing it would be the last time. He died of a heart attack 3 days later. She said, "Now, I hug everyone like it's the last time." She doesn't say that with sadness, but with deep, fierce presence. Every embrace is real, because the cup is already broken. Buddhist insight. Anicca, the truth of impermanence. In Buddhism, impermanence, anicca, is not just a philosophical concept. It is the very foundation of liberation. Nothing lasts. Every relationship, every possession, every moment. This isn't a tragedy. It's what makes life so achingly beautiful. When you stop pretending that things will last forever, you start to live fully. When you understand that everything is passing, including yourself, you begin to let go of the illusion of control. And in that letting go, you become free. Zen reflection. Love without attachment. People often ask, if everything ends, why love at all? But the real question is, if everything ends, how can I afford not to love with my whole heart while I can? To accept impermanence is not to become cold or distant. It is to love even more deeply, because you are no longer trying to possess. You are simply witnessing, celebrating, being with, without demand, without clinging, without fear. Practice. Already gone, meditation. Try this. Close your eyes. Picture someone you love. Now imagine they are already gone, not in a morbid way, but as a truth of time. Then slowly, bring them back into your awareness. Now feel the gratitude, feel the tenderness, feel the urgency to love them well, today. This is what it means to hold the teacup, knowing it will break, and loving it anyway. What if we lived like everything was temporary? Imagine if you treated your morning coffee as if it were the last one. Would you drink it slower? Would you savor the warmth in your hands? What if you kissed your partner, or hugged your mother, or held your child, knowing this moment will never return? That is not sadness. That is reverence. That is being awake. Application. How to use this teaching in daily life. When you feel frustration in a relationship, remind yourself, this moment is fragile. Cherish it. When something breaks or ends, breathe. The cup was always going to break. When you fall in love, love bravely. Even though it may not last. Especially because it won't. This is how we become less afraid of loss, by living with our eyes open to it. Thich Nhat Hanh's words. Zen master Thich Nhat Hanh once said, "Letting go gives us freedom. And freedom is the only condition for happiness. We fear letting go because we think it means losing. But what if it actually means loving more truly?" Final reflection. So today, I invite you to ask, what are you holding too tightly? What are you afraid to lose? And what would change if you lived as if the teacup were already broken? Could you love more deeply? Could you smile more freely? Could you let go more gently? Because the truth is, everything we love will pass. But that doesn't diminish the love. It amplifies it. And when it's time to say goodbye, we can do so not with regret, but with grace. Because we held the cup with both hands. We drank the tea of this moment. And we were fully here, even as it slipped through our fingers. In the next story, we meet a wealthy merchant offering the Buddha a luxurious silk robe, a gift born of admiration. But what the Buddha teaches him in return is a radical lesson in true generosity. The meaning of giving, and who is truly in need. I'll meet you there, in Story 8. We often think of generosity as giving something material. A donation, a gift, a meal. But in the Buddha's eyes, true generosity, dana, isn't measured by what you give, but by how you give it. This is a story about a robe. But deeper than that, it's a story about ego, compassion, and learning to give from the heart, not the self. The story begins. A merchant and a noble gift. In the time when the Buddha was walking from village to village, spreading his teachings, his presence inspired many, from peasants to kings. One day, in a small bustling town, a wealthy merchant heard that the Buddha was staying nearby. This man was known for his riches, silks from the north, spices from the south, jewels that glimmered in his home. But wealth alone had not brought him peace. So he sought something else, merit. He approached the Buddha, bowing deeply, and said, "Lord Buddha, I wish to offer you this robe. It is made of the finest silk, hand-woven, fit for royalty. Please accept it as a sign of my devotion." The robe shimmered with beauty, threads of gold running through scarlet patterns. The disciples looked on, but the Buddha, eyes calm and kind, replied, "Thank you, kind sir, but I cannot accept this robe. It is too extravagant for a simple monk like me. I wear what protects the body, not what decorates it." The merchant was stunned. "But master," he said, "I offer this from my heart." And the Buddha, with a soft smile, said, "If your heart is sincere, then offer this robe to someone who truly needs it, someone cold, someone clothed in rags, for that is where this gift can warm both the body and the spirit." The turning point. Giving to impress versus giving to relieve. In that moment, something shifted in the merchant. He had given not from true compassion, but from image, from pride, from a desire to be seen as virtuous. But now, he understood that real giving is invisible. It asks nothing in return. So he took the robe, and gave it to a beggar by the village gate. A man shivering, wrapped in torn burlap, too weak to stand, and the beggar wept, not because of the robe, but because of the warmth that came with it. The next day, the merchant returned to the Buddha. "I did as you said," he whispered, "and I have never felt so light." The Buddha smiled. "That is because you finally gave from emptiness, not from the need to be full." Reflection. What is true generosity? In Buddhism, generosity is the first of the 10 paramitas, the perfections that lead to awakening. But dana is not just the act of giving. It is the intention behind it. Are you giving to be admired? Are you giving to feel better than someone? Are you giving only to those you like? If so, that is not dana. True giving is unconditional. It is free from ego. It doesn't attach to outcome. It says, "You need. I give. That is all." Real-world example. Anonymous kindness. There's a story I once heard from a monk in Sri Lanka. An elderly woman, poor herself, would secretly place rice packets outside the homes of families with sick children. No name, no credit. One day, someone saw her and asked why she didn't want recognition. She smiled and said, "Because if I'm seen, they'll thank me, and that's not the point." That's dana. The layers of giving. Buddhist texts speak of 3 levels of giving. Giving material things, money, food, clothing. Giving fearlessness, protecting others, helping them feel safe. Giving dharma, sharing wisdom, guiding others out of suffering. The Buddha rejected the robe not because material gifts are wrong, but because intention matters more. He knew that what truly transforms us is not the object, but the offering of the heart. The robe as a symbol. In Theravada traditions, the robe, savara, symbolizes renunciation, humility, and equality. It is not meant to be ornate. It is dyed in earth tones. It is patched, recycled, plain. To offer a lavish robe to a monk is like offering perfume to a flame. It distracts rather than nourishes. The robe the Buddha wore was stitched from discarded cloth found in cremation grounds. That was his pride, not silk, not gold. A teaching from Ajahn Chah, the great Thai forest master. Ajahn Chah once said, "If you let go a little, you'll have a little peace. If you let go a lot, you'll have a lot of peace. If you let go completely, you'll have complete peace." True generosity is letting go, not of things, but of self, of ownership, of the story, "I am the giver." Practical reflection. Where can you give freely? Today, ask yourself, is there someone I can help, without needing them to know? Can I give a smile, a gesture, a moment of listening? Can I forgive someone, as a gift to both of us? And when you give, pause. Notice. Is this from ego, or from empathy? Because the difference is everything. Final reflection. So today, I leave you with this question. What would happen if you gave something, and told no one? What if you did good, and didn't post it? What if your offering wasn't about being seen, but about seeing? Because generosity is not a transaction. It is not a performance. It is a practice. One that dissolves the self, and reveals the heart. Like the merchant, you might find that the robe was not the gift. Your transformation was. In our next story, the Buddha does not face a merchant or a disciple, but a wild, raging elephant. sent to destroy him. But instead of running, he radiates loving kindness. And what happens next will show you the true power of metta, the compassion that disarms even fury. I'll meet you there, in Story 9. It's easy to talk about compassion when life is calm. But what about when you're under threat? When someone charges at you, not with words, but with fury? Most of us respond with fear, or anger, or defense. But the Buddha responded with metta, loving kindness. And what happened next would become one of the most powerful stories of non-violence ever told. The threat rises. Devadatta's plot. At the height of his spiritual journey, the Buddha's following had grown. Thousands came to hear him speak, to walk the Eightfold Path, to seek liberation from suffering. But not everyone rejoiced in his influence. One man in particular, Devadatta, was consumed with jealousy. He was not only a cousin of the Buddha, but once a student and monk under him. But instead of finding peace, Devadatta sought power. He plotted to harm the Buddha, first through schemes, then through violence, and one day, he made his boldest move yet. He convinced the elephant handlers in the royal stables to release a wild, drunken elephant named Nalagiri into the street, at the exact moment the Buddha would be walking through. His goal? To trample the enlightened one. To end the path of peace with a stampede of rage. The chaos unfolds. The gates burst open. Nalagiri roared into the street, enormous, furious, eyes red with madness. People screamed. Vendors abandoned their stalls. Children were pulled inside, even the Buddha's own disciples, seeing the beast charging straight toward their teacher, cried out, "Lord Buddha, run!" But he did not move. He stood tall, still, unshaken. His eyes rested gently on the beast. His palms slowly opened, in the mudra of fearlessness. And he began to walk, not away, but toward the elephant. The power of metta. As he walked, he focused all his heart on one thing. Metta, loving kindness. Not just toward his disciples. Not just toward the villagers. But toward Nalagiri. Toward the creature sent to kill him. He radiated thoughts of compassion. May you be free from suffering. May you know peace. May your heart be calm. With every step, his energy expanded, like ripples in a still lake. And then, something astonishing happened. The elephant slowed. His breath heaved. His eyes, once wild with rage, softened. He stopped, then lowered his head, then knelt at the Buddha's feet. The same being meant to destroy him, now bowed in surrender. The crowd gasped. And then, silence. The lesson. Kindness is the ultimate disarmament. The Buddha did not fight the elephant. He didn't use magic or weapons or command. He met violence with compassion. And in doing so, he revealed a truth we forget. The most dangerous force is not anger, it is unhealed pain. And the most powerful weapon is love that does not retreat. Insight. When you are faced with rage, let's bring this home. Have you ever had someone come at you with fury? A partner shouting, a colleague raging, a stranger attacking your character? And have you ever met that energy with more of the same? What happened? Usually, things get worse. But now imagine this. They shout. You breathe. They insult. You stay rooted. They accuse. You meet their pain with presence. Not to let them win, but to refuse to lose yourself. That is what the Buddha taught that day. You don't have to match energy. You can transform it. Real life story. The father and the teen. A man once shared with me that his teenage son had grown increasingly hostile, shouting, slamming doors, full of anger. One day, in a moment of mindfulness, the father did something different. When the son screamed, the father said nothing. He walked over, put a hand on his back, and said, "I'm not your enemy. I love you even when you can't see it." And the boy broke down sobbing. What disarmed him was not logic. It was love. Metta meditation. Cultivating loving kindness. In Buddhist practice, we train our hearts to radiate metta in all directions. May I be happy. May I be safe. May I be at peace. Then we extend it to loved ones, to strangers, to enemies. Why? Because no one who truly feels loved wants to cause harm. When we practice metta daily, even toward those who hurt us, we begin to untangle the knots of fear and aggression within ourselves. And that ripple affects everything. Modern science. Compassion changes the brain. Studies show that consistent metta practice increases activity in brain regions linked to empathy, emotional regulation, and well-being. People who practice loving kindness are less reactive under stress, more resilient to insults, more forgiving, and even physically healthier. This isn't just spiritual poetry. It's neurology. Final reflection. So today, I ask you, who, in your life, feels like the elephant? Who charges at you with pain disguised as power? And how have you responded? What would happen if, just once, you stood your ground and met them not with defense, but with a silent whisper in your heart? May you be free from suffering. Because anger is a wave, but loving kindness is the ocean. And one soft gaze, one breath, can stop the stampede. Not by force, but by presence and love. In our next story, the Buddha tells a parable about a man who builds a raft to cross a river, and then wonders whether he should carry it forever. What he teaches is not just about rafts, but about teachings, beliefs, and the courage to let go once we've crossed to the other side. We all carry something, a teaching, a belief, a tool, a person, a past, and at some point in our path, it served us, it helped us survive, cross, heal, but eventually, comes the moment to ask, do I still need this? Or am I simply afraid to let go? This is the story of the raft. But more deeply, it's a teaching about freedom. The story begins. A man by the river. The Buddha once gathered his disciples and said, imagine a man walking alone through the forest. He comes upon a river, wide, deep, full of strong currents. There is no bridge, no boat, but he must cross to reach safety. So the man collects logs, branches, and vines. With care, he builds a raft. Then he paddles with effort and focus, crossing the river. Eventually, tired but safe, he reaches the far shore. And then, the Buddha paused. He looked at his monks and asked, now tell me, my friends, should this man carry the raft on his back as he walks forward? The monks laughed softly. No, venerable sir. The raft has served its purpose. He should leave it behind. And the Buddha said, so too, with the Dhamma. Wait, let go of the teachings? This might sound strange at first. Why would the Buddha tell us to let go of the very path that led us to freedom? Because he understood something that even modern minds forget. Any path, any system, any belief, can become a prison when we cling too tightly. The teachings are a raft, not a trophy. They are meant to be used, not worshipped. They are the way, not the destination. Example: the meditation checklist. I once met a student who had been meditating for years. But every time she sat, she ran through a mental checklist. Am I watching the breath right? Is this samatha or vipassana? Did I get to stage 4 yet? Was that a jhana or just drowsiness? She had turned practice into performance. Eventually, she came to me exhausted. And I said, "What if you just sat and let the breath breathe you?" That moment, the letting go of the technique became her real meditation. The raft had served her. Now, she could walk. What are you still carrying? We all build rafts. A belief that once protected you from fear. A relationship that once gave you strength. A routine that once helped you heal. Even your own spiritual identity. I am a Buddhist. I am a meditator. I am a seeker. But ask yourself, has the river been crossed? And if so, are you still dragging the raft? Maybe it's time to bow to it and let it float away. Application. Healthy detachment does not equal rejection. This is not about disrespect. Letting go is not betrayal. It's honoring something for what it was, and releasing it when it no longer serves. Just like the man does not hate the raft. He simply doesn't need to carry it through the forest. In fact, clinging to it would slow him down, weigh him, distract him. So he bows in gratitude and moves on. Zen parallel. If you meet the Buddha on the road, in Zen, there's a famous koan. If you meet the Buddha on the road, kill him. This doesn't mean violence. It means, if you cling to an image of the Buddha, or even of enlightenment, you miss the living truth. Because real awakening cannot be held. It must be lived, moment to moment. Real-world example. The teacher who steps aside. A spiritual teacher I once studied with, wise, funny, humble, one day told his students, "If you're still quoting me 5 years after this retreat, I have failed you." He meant, I'm not here to give you answers. I'm here to help you listen to your own knowing. I am the raft, but you are the one who must walk. Letting go can feel like loss. Sometimes, letting go of the raft feels like losing part of ourselves. The version of you who needed that belief, that ritual, that rule. She was sacred. He was brave. They got you here. But to move forward, we must sometimes thank the old self and lay them down gently. Because crossing into a new way of being requires lightness and trust. Final reflection. So today, I ask you, what raft got you across the river? And are you still carrying it? Can you pause, bow, and say, "Thank you. You saved me, but I don't need you now." Because true wisdom is not in building the raft. It's in knowing when to let it go. And as you walk, empty-handed but full-hearted, you'll realize you never needed to hold so much. You are the path. You are the river. You are the sky watching it all. And the freedom you seek was always in the letting go. And that, dear friend, completes our 10-story journey into the heart of Buddhist wisdom. Stories not just to read, but to live. Let them settle. Let them breathe inside you. Return to them when the world grows noisy. And remember, you don't need more answers. You need more presence. If these stories touched you, taught you, or helped you breathe a little deeper, we invite you to stay with us here at Buddhism in every moment. Like, subscribe, and share these teachings like a quiet seed in the wind. May it grow in the hearts that need it most. Namaste. Friend, you've walked far. Now rest here, in stillness.